Welcome to this presentation about writing your science research project. So the assessments that we do for research in science at Bream Bay College are pretty simple to achieve well on, but you need to plan your time, and this is particularly true if you find it hard to get things started or if you find it really overwhelming to make decisions. You need to organise your resources. So there's nothing worse than going to sit down to write and realise that you've lost things. We will avoid that. You need to structure your report. Nothing infuriates your marker more than you saying the same thing in 3 different places, slightly different each time, one of which was wrong. And focus on one part of this checkpoint, of this list at a time. Don't be trying to do your research part and be trying to write one thing at a time. So step 1, it's all about dates and reminders. So you have devices, use them. Check the key dates and send you reminders on that date and a couple of days before. So if you have a draft deadline, you need a reminder probably 3 or 4 days before that draft deadline. When I say a responsible person, this is someone who actually has an investment in you and wants you to succeed. They need to remind you and check in on your progress. I strongly suggest at this point that you set up a research log or a journal that you can use. You can use a book if you want, if you think you won't lose it. But your journal, if it's a Google document, it should have a sensible name, and you're going to put all your research, all your information, all your facts you're going to put in that, and you put your key dates into that Google document or into that journal. So now we're going to check that you actually understand the assessment. This is the first time that we've even looked at the content of the assessment. You read it thoroughly. If it's provided online, the key points go into your planning document or your journal, whatever your planning document and journal is. You need to check, do you understand the key science ideas? Do you understand the non-science ideas? Do you know what format it needs to be submitted in? What do those key learning verbs mean? And what is the key things you need for the grade that you're aiming for? If you don't understand any of those things, ask now. Ask for any clarification you need right now when it's fresh in the teacher's mind and they're feeling generous and thoughtful, and write your question and your answer directly onto your assessment sheet or directly into your document or your journal, your planning document. Step 3, start preparing. So I like lists of things, and I would say your first thing to do is from the assessment and from your own understanding, this list should be the key things your report needs to cover. Make these headings really big and really bold, so when you open the document, you can see you're going to use these to organize your research in your document. Now, I would put those list of key things below the actual assessment outline itself. So when you first open the document, you see the actual assessment outline, then you see your list of key things, and then I would have a tick chart or a checklist. Now, if you're quite motivated by tick charts, by all means, make one and stick it up on your wall. Add any extra things. So you might have on your tick chart, you might have read original documents, or you might find that's too big and you might break it down and you might have a tick chart that says a tick step that says read 1 document a day, or it might say read all the scientific research on this day and then read all the environmental implications on this day. And so basically break it down as small as you need to. Each step should be something you don't find overwhelming, particularly at the beginning, and especially if you're one of those people who gets lost and overwhelmed easily. Now look back for how long you think each thing will take and put those dates on your checklist. So that's the final date that you should be doing those things. If you're awesome and you get started early, you can give yourself an extra big tick for getting something done before that date. And if you do that, reward yourself in some way to remind yourself you just made an awesome decision about your learning. At this point, I would ask either someone who is clever and motivated from your class or your teacher to check that you have all the necessary things, that you haven't forgot anything, you haven't missed one really crucial part of your assessment. And then, and only then, start your research. Now, you might be given a list of places that you can start. You might be given specific resources that you can use, or you might be flinging yourself like a stranded seal on the great internet of resources. At this point, you start working through them. You put the relevant information under the headings. This is why you made the headings. So we might have a heading that's called electricity generation. Any resources you find about electricity generation, that's where you type them in. You do not copy. You type them in yourself with the amazing power of your brain. If you don't understand something, particularly a science-related something, it is completely acceptable to ask your teacher for help and say, hey, I just realized I don't actually know how electromagnetic induction works. Can you explain it to me? Bullet points are fine. I strongly recommend that you put the URLs into your planning document as you go so that later you remember which websites you went to. And because if you think your notes, when you look back over them, maybe you won't quite know where such and such came from, put a letter next to each URL so it'll have a colon or space or whatever, www.awesomephysicsite.co.nz. And then next to the note that came from that site, you'll have an A as well. So you can go back and look at what the original was when you actually come to write your assessment if you think you need more help. Now, this last one is how you check that you've actually stuck that knowledge in your brain. So next to the bare fact, have a piece of deeper learning or deeper thinking if you can. So you might have the Hokianga Harbour is an excellent place for marine electricity generation. And that's the fact. So next to it, you'll say because, or you'll say this is why people want to put marine turbines there. You're going to have that next step that your brain's going to provide for you. At this point, after you've done all your research, you could be feeling really awesome and on top of it, or you could be feeling really overwhelmed. That's fine. Sometimes when you've got a huge mass of data in front of you, it just feels like it's actually the end of the world. At this point, stop. Close your planning and research document. Now you are moving on to your final report. Open a Google document just for your final report, completely separate with its own title. And at this point, you're going to add the headings for the sections. I'm going to get onto that in a second. But I would write under that heading a bullet point list of the key things you need to cover. And each bullet point could be the topic for a paragraph. So if you're good at topic sentences, write those bullet points as topic sentences. Compare your plan to the assessment to make sure you've covered everything. If need be, ask someone to check that for you. Make sure your plan is going to meet the criteria. So here's a specific example based on the Year 13 Physics 1. Your introduction, write it last. Do not write it first. You will take forever. You need to have a section on why this is an important topic. This is going to be a describing paragraph or couple of paragraphs. Why are we interested in it? You're then going to dive into your physics explanation. How does electricity generation work? And in particular, marine generators. You're going to explain why this is relevant in the Hokianga, and that is going to include the physics reasons why the harbour is suitable. You're going to talk about the benefits, and it's really important at this point that you talk about not just scientific benefits, but you talk about economics, you talk about the environment, you talk about the people in the communities that live there. And I'm not just talking about people communities, animal communities too. And then the drawbacks the same. You must include your opinion with justification based on research, but the reasons don't have to just be scientific. Human reasons are based on a whole variety of things. So you can say, for example, I think this because of a social reason. And that's okay. We're going to resume this in number 2.